Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Fridays in the Five. This week is very special because it's my first week actually interviewing somebody, so it's going to be a little bit different. Bear with us if there's technical difficulties. I'd like to introduce Kevin Rogers. Kevin is the lead pastor here at New Song Church. And Ford City recently released a bit of a new marketing campaign called Ford City Originals. And when I heard about Ford City Originals, I couldn't really stop thinking about the actual people that have been here, that have been grinding, that have been making really big changes, and Kevin's name kept coming up. So when I worked at New Beginnings a few years ago now, I actually had a bunch of residents that would come here for community service. And so I saw firsthand the kinds of things that New Song Church was doing in the community. Kevin's name sort of stuck in my head ever since, and I've been looking for ways to sort of collaborate and make sure that we can connect again. And so I thought this would be a great opportunity to introduce Kevin to you and to talk about the great things he's doing, moving, and shaking in Ward 5. Kevin, welcome.
Hey, good to be with you, Adam, and hello, Windsor.
So Kevin, you've been here for a while in this community. So tell us what the connection is to New Song, to Ward 5, and how did you sort of get here? What's your journey been?
Okay, so first of all, I was a kid who grew up going to church. My dad was a pastor. Now he said, the last thing in the world I want to do is be a pastor. And
that didn't work out quite well.
No, I ended up doing the last thing in the world, and the last thing in the world was actually a good thing. So growing up in church, I often felt that there was a lot of barriers between the community and the church that were unnecessary. And so I had this desire to, when I did come to Windsor to plant a church, the thought in my mind was that there needed to be more churches in the city core area. Historically, churches were all in the center, but over decades, there's a gradual shift and move, just like businesses. That's why we have suburbs. And the churches followed suit. And when churches leave a community, there's a gap, there's a void. So I came, a young guy in early 30s, idealistic, and moved down here in September 1993 and began organizing for a church. By February 94, we held our first services at the old Tivoli Theater, which is now the Walkerville Theater.
Yeah.
Yep. And so we were in the old Tivoli Theater. We moved into St. Aidan's Anglican for a while, but we were getting away from some of the core city areas. And then we were in Victoria Public School. And so about 3 years into our existence, we'd been searching for properties, places to set up our church more permanently. And I came across a listing for this bar that had gone into receivership called Mongo Murph's. And at that time, it had been shut down about a year and a half. And, in 97, Drillard Road was a lot less developed than it is now. At the time that we came here, it was an area that had high crime. And now, if you follow crime stats, often Ford City is one of the lowest areas for crime in the city. And so there's been that transformation over time. When I started the church, I had a very intentional sense that we needed to be a church that stayed in the city core and focused on poverty issues.
That's awesome. So would you consider yourself then a Ford City original?
Yes.
One of the bunch?
Yes.
That's awesome. So I know that you guys have this church here that's so much more than that. You're working with an amazing sort of diverse population in our community. What are some of the services that you offer, and what's your reach in our community? Because I know it's not just here in Ford City.
Probably the one that's getting the most attention right now is Feeding Windsor. Feeding Windsor began about 2 years before we adopted it at New Song. And Roger Fordham is a man who has worked in the food industry for most of his life, and he's owned some bars in his day, and so he's always been an entrepreneurial business type. And he was doing an outreach at St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church downtown. And that church, like a lot of mainline churches, it was just shrinking in size. The money was running out. They eventually closed. So Feeding Windsor, though, was viable. They were doing feeding programs. So we adopted them as our own. And we now have 6 locations that Feeding Windsor is serving food across the city in various ways. One of the ways we do it is by partnering with other churches that want to do, like we've done for over 20 years on Drouillard, providing hospitality to our neighborhood. So we have a feeding program here that runs all through the week, Tuesday to Friday, breakfast and lunch, Friday and Saturday suppers, and as well as being an outlet for the Downtown Mission has Forgotten Harvest. So if we were to go in the other room right now, there's probably a ton of produce there. This week we got peppers, tomatoes, and potatoes. And it varies from week to week what we get. But tomorrow there'll be people lining up to get free produce. But the feeding program, we also organize a feeding program with Ambassador Baptist Church on the West End next to Marlborough School. And also with Throne of Grace, the Nigerian church that purchased the former St. Andrew's downtown. So they are 2 other churches that, like us, are opening the doors to the community saying, hey, we want to provide hospitality. This is our way of loving our neighbor.
For sure, for sure.
Then we have feeding programs at 920 Olette and 2455 Rivard. Those are city-run housing, 400-unit apartment buildings with people over the age of 50, many of them low income, many social needs in that context. In those 2 buildings, we have a lunch program where Monday to Friday the residents can eat lunch for $22 a month. So about 75 cents a meal for a balanced nutritional lunch meal. And the most recent one, the City of Windsor has emergency housing in different places because of the ongoing housing crisis. One of the places is the I Check Inn. Used to be called the I Sleep Inn, but I guess the name changed. They changed it. I Check In. So the I Check In, we have the contract with Feeding Windsor 7 days a week, 3 meals a day. To feed all of the residents there. The entire hotel is being used for emergency housing, and so we're there providing food services, and we, that's one of the things at New Song, I would say. That's kind of the bell ringer right now. Over the years, we've done a variety of things. We do the usual church things, children's programs, youth programs, things like that. But one of the things that we did a few years back was something we called hardcore church. So a lot of the hardcore and screamo bands in the city, they would rent a hall, and then next thing you know, the neighbors are calling the cops because what are all these freaky looking young people, hanging out on the sidewalk, smoking, and people thought, oh, all these thugs, but really it was just young people that loved screamo and hardcore music. And we recognized that there was a shortage of good venues. In rented halls, they often would have trouble because the management or the neighbors didn't understand what this was. In many of the bars, the bands would come to play, but many bar owners, their primary concern is, can you sell beer? And so we took our room here at New Song Church, and for about 3 years, we were a hardcore screamo venue. And we had up to, I think the biggest show we had in here might have been a couple hundred people. And the way we approached it was, this is another way we can love our neighbor. We can love young people who like hardcore screamo music.
Yep.
And so, you know, we'd open up a snack bar. Our sound crew here are exceptional, and so we gave them really good sound, and there were so many of them that time after time would come back and say that this was the best venue in the city.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so, you know, we're always looking for ways that we as a church can create hospitality, can be community builders. Back when Steve Green used to be a part of the church here, we initiated the start of the Ford City Garden. And that was 3 vacant city lots with old Chesterfields and weeds growing high, and Steve really had this idea that we need to get into community gardening, and led the charge. And so we're always looking for ways that we can just lean in and make the world a better place.
That's amazing. So when I came down for Stroll Drouillard a couple months ago, and I went to the community garden, and there was a woman there who told me that they used to specialize in growing old tires and Chesterfields, and she's really proud that there's a great transition that's gone on now, and now it's on to things that can actually nourish us.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of a thread for you, right? It's nourishing this community, not only through food, which is an obvious one, but it sounds like the arts and culture and inclusivity is a really big part of what you're doing here.
Yeah, very much so.
That's fantastic.
One thing that I often will say, remind people of during a Sunday when people are coming to our service, you know, once in a while I'll just say, hey everybody, this is a no shame zone. So, you know, we're not here to find fault with others. We're not here to hang our heads in shame. Right. We're here to walk as sons and daughters of the Most High.
That's awesome.
You know, and there's just let me just say a little bit about the hospitality of the feeding programs that we've done over the years. There have been many people that come here and still to even this morning. You know, they're seriously in trouble. They've got they're addicted to ice, or you know, they've got extreme mental health problems, and this is something that so much of the city is afraid of, and especially if you're downtown or different areas, and you see people walking around that are either strung out or just are homeless and. Or dealing with mental health and maybe have some eccentricities, you know, so we've always taken the approach that the best way to treat people is as if they were in your home, and we try to inculcate that environment here. Right. So there are people that we've seen over time who have been in really stressed out situations that stabilize, and it isn't all us, we know that, but it does make a difference if every day you get to go somewhere and have a little bit to eat, drink some coffee and talk to some people who are not in the same headspace as you. And so over the years, people that have been, kind of very much loners and living in isolation, have come out of hiding into a place like this. Right. I remember one night, it was a Friday night dinner. This was a few years back, and it gets crowded in here, and it's noisy, and it's open to the public, so anybody can come here Friday night at 6 and have a meal with us. And I remember standing in a crowded line, and the place was buzzing and loud, and much like a busy bar, you know? And standing in line for food, and this woman this close to me, in front of me, is telling me how she's agoraphobic. Okay. and yet she's in this busy room with hundreds of people. And I said to her, okay, but if you're afraid of being in crowds, what are you feeling right now? She says, oh, well, this is different. And
she felt like she belonged.
Yeah, she felt like she belonged. She
Yeah.
felt it was safe.
Yep.
And so we always are working to make sure that it feels safe and accepting for everyone. And once in a while we do have to draw a line, and once in a while, you know, we have to call the cops on somebody.
Yeah.
But you know, I think we really know that deep down, everybody that we see in the city is somebody's brother or sister, son or daughter, you know, father, mother.
For sure, yeah.
And needs to be loved and respected like family.
That's really important, and I think, so I come from a social work background, and I know for a fact that when you have spaces for intervention, wherever they may be, the more points you can have for that intervention to meet people where they are, the better interventions become, the better sort of healing becomes, because you're meeting them in a space where they're not coming to you, you're sort of accepting them at their base level and saying, this is okay, you're still a human being. Yeah. And here's a path forward, right? Here's some steps you can take. And it doesn't have to be all at once. And it can be over, you know, a really long time, because we're going to be here. We're going to be consistent for you. I think that makes such a difference. I don't want to get too much into, I think, the homelessness and the addiction, only because it's turned into a political sort of football right now. It's a very much an election issue. And I feel like it's not an issue. It shouldn't be an issue because they're people. They're not issues. And it's something that I think as a city council, if I get in or whatever happens in October, it's something that we all have to come together and sort of put our heads together, be very cohesive on, and come up with a solution. I think one of the unfortunate pieces is that we're reacting to this, and this isn't part of a plan. Right? It shouldn't have to be a reaction. It should be something that we've thought about and we've sort of considered and taken care of over the years before it turns into an epidemic, right? And we also know that this is a Canada-wide problem. It's not just a Windsor-centric thing, right? So definitely complex. So as someone who works with sort of our region's most vulnerable populations, what do you see as sort of the highest needs in this community and sort of Windsor as a whole?
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly that human component, you know, everybody needs somebody to love them. Right. Everybody needs somebody to love. You know, there's that human, one of the things that I find grievous is when people who are struggling, you know, not everybody on disability can be categorized the same, you know. But when you have somebody on disability who has poor communication skills, you know, has difficulty with, you know, communication and impulse control and some of these things, you know, it's easy for them to get lost in the shuffle. And so one of the greatest needs I see is for friends, advocates. People who come alongside to say, can I go with you to that appointment? You know, and help with the communicating, help to, you know, provide some stability in the presentation sometimes. And I mean, many people are perfectly fine to do it on their own. But for the ones that can't, so we have a woman that has volunteered with us here for many years. Marie Morrissey, if you have any friends out there. Marie retired from the education in the medical field. And I did a funeral, a graveside funeral a few years ago for a woman that had overdosed and was living a pretty difficult life. And so at the graveside, as I conducted this service for this woman that I really didn't know, but I just did my research and tried to do my best to make it an event that, you know, honored her. And so as we did that funeral, she came to me afterwards and she said, that's the kind of funeral I want. and she said, when I retire, I'm retiring in 3 years. When I retire, I want to come and volunteer with you. Oh, nice. And I, you know, people always will say, oh, yeah. And I
here's the
I
plan.
think, well, 3 years, we'll see. 3 years later, she contacted me and she said, "Do you remember me?" I said, "Yes, I do." And she said, "What can I do?"
Wow.
And so here is somebody who has been at the top of her game in her profession, you know, very professional, lifelong Catholic, and wants to volunteer at this little Pentecostal church. And I said, "Well, we've got this drop-in happening here, and a lot of people just come here and sit and drink coffee and visit and have a bite to eat. Would you just start hanging around?
Yeah.
And let's see what happens. Just hang around, just a ministry of presence."
Right.
And so she did, and it wasn't long until she was going to bat advocating for some people that were in really tough situations.
That's incredible.
She went to court more than once representing people, and she's
wow.
not a lawyer,
Yeah.
and she won the cases.
Talk about perseverance, eh?
Yeah, she's smart. She studied up. She went in, and she just appealed to the best in the situation, and looked for a way for justice to be done that was not so much punitive as it was restorative. And she's just been able to help people with housing and many things like that. And that's, I think, you know, one of the greatest needs we have in the city is for everybody to find somebody that they can help, somebody they can advocate for. You know, maybe there's somebody that has empty rooms and you know, is willing to find a quiet person that can move in, you know, and rent a room. You know, like there's ways as a community, I think, that we can address some of the big issues. And it isn't always top down. It isn't always the government funding everything. You know, we're a congregation. On a Sunday morning, we might have 100 people here, and that'd be a good Sunday. But we are a congregation who, you know, takes up the offering every week, and we eke by with, you know, with the little bit we get.
For sure,
we keep going, and but then through things like Feeding Windsor, you know, we've been able to step into a couple apartment buildings, providing lunch programs at a something that's so affordable. You know, anybody on a pension that has to pay for their rent, their transportation, their food, you know, all of their needs on a meager check.
It's quite a bit,
It's quite a bit, but if you empower them and say for $22 a month, you can have lunch Monday to Friday all month. You know, to buy that same lunch themselves,
course, it'd be triple or quadruple the cost.
They'd be spending $150 or $200 to have lunch all month.
Right.
And so that's not a high cost solution. But it's a community solution.
Right.
And you know, when there is funding, when there is big resources. Well, that's wonderful because then you can take something that's good and you can multiply
that you already know it's able to sort of work and do its do the good, right? That's awesome. You know, one of the things that I talk about with clients at work is, you know, I work with small businesses and this idea of social enterprise, and it's something that's become a bit of a buzzword, but it's at its heart it's putting sort of good business practices and principles into doing good. And sort of those sort of setting up sort of the systems for success that a normal business would have, and taking those profits and sort of reinvesting into a community. And I think Fort City's so great, and Ward 5 is, we have so many businesses here that are actually doing that. You know, they really contribute back to the community, and that's incredible. And sort of, I think you're sort of a piece of that, you know? So in terms of, we're looking future forward, what kind of leadership do you want to see for Windsor? And sort of what's your vision, not only for your congregation and your ministry, but for the city itself? What would you like to see?
I think that when, if you think about what urban means in its essence, I look at urban and I define it as high diversity, high disparity, and high density.
Okay.
You know, that to me is a good definition of urban.
Yeah.
And then there's suburban.
Right.
And sub means it's below, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I love the city.
Yes. Sorry, LaSalle.
I love Windsor. But I think that when we have ways that that diversity and that disparity can come together in a healthy means. So we have people here that you know are homeless that come and are a part of the church here. We also have people, you know, that make six figures, and not too many of those, but I can think of at least one, one or two, and you know, but we have suburban people as well. You know, we have so in this kind of context where you bring people together, sometimes we think that if we have our wits about us and we have money and we have a lot of skill, that boy, can we ever help those people, right?
Yeah.
But what happens in an environment like this is it's not us and them, it's just us.
Right.
And you know, so somebody who's very, you know, successful and been studious in their life gets close to somebody who's not had that privilege or you know, had a very difficult life.
Right.
And we learn from each other. You know, one of the reasons I think God called me to Windsor to start New Song Church was that God wanted to reshape my heart about poverty and help me to shed a lot of the middle-class assumptions that I had and that I grew up with. And, you know, so learning how to see people for who they really are. And when I think about leadership in the city, those are the kind of leaders I dream of. The ones that, you know, are just very compassionate and understanding of people at every strata of society, every situation. And that doesn't mean we leave our brains at the door or we just get, you know, overwhelmed and gushy about, you know, we're gonna save everybody, you know, and you know, but no, it's out of living relationship that change comes. And I think that's so vital, you know, is to have venues and ways around the city for living relationship to emerge, where I'm going to learn from you and you're going to learn from me. I'm going to meet your needs, you're going to meet my need.
Right. Almost like a crossroad opportunities, right?
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for being here today with us.
You're welcome.
Actually, thank you for inviting me here.
Yeah.
Everyone, if you want to check out New Song Church, Drouillard Road is shut down for most of the weekend. So we have Drops on Drouillard, which is a festival happening on Saturday. And then we have Open Streets Windsor Essex, or actually just Open Streets Windsor, which is happening all day on Sunday. So come on down and check us out.
And Doors Open.
Yes,
Doors Open
as well.
Saturday and Sunday across the city. We're one of the tour sites for Doors Open.
Excellent.
So Saturday and Sunday this week, we're canceling the regular programming and we're doing open house from 10 to 4, both days. On the hour, we're going to play a little bit of music and just have people tell stories about the community and about the church. That's awesome. So we'll just have a little short sample and building tours, and we're doing that both days.
That's great. So if you're looking for ways to get involved with this community, come on out and check it out for yourself. It's a great opportunity. Well, Kevin, thank you so much. Thank you guys for listening and watching. And as always, I'll see you on the campaign trail.